Hey everyone, this is Michael.
And this is Steven. And we are the Movie Bros React.
We
Well,
sure are.
guys, this is a very special Thursday night. Normally, Michael and I would be bringing you our favorite films, headlines, and top 10 songs. This would have been, 1989 is what
Correct.
would have been scheduled for tonight. But we like to keep you on your toes, and we're going to bring you something that is extra, extra special. 1989 can wait. In fact, it's already happened. So we can wait a little bit longer because tonight we're going to have our very first special guest interview and discussion. And it is a real honor and treat for us tonight. And Michael, I would like you to break the news to everyone who may be just finding this stream here and hasn't seen the picture yet. Who is our guest tonight for our first live guest?
Our guest is the famous Roger Christian. He was the set decorator for Star Wars, the third person hired by George Lucas. He worked closely with George Lucas and he won an Oscar on this. He also worked with Ridley Scott on the Alien movie and was nominated for an Oscar. And now he does a lot of directing. And he actually has a documentary coming up called Galaxy Built on Hope and a book called The Cinema Alchemist, which I'm halfway done with. I've been reading it, and it's interesting because it talks about his designing Star Wars and Alien, and I'm on the Star Wars part, and
Ooh.
it's very interesting. You talk about a wing and a prayer and string and tape. That's all he had. So,
He's a regular MacGyver, is what you're saying
oh
then.
my gosh, it's just crazy what he did.
That's awesome. Well, before we bring on our guest, Mr. Christian, tonight, we do want to let you know, of course, start sending in your questions if you have one. Um, you know, he's done so much, so many things. So, feel free to send your questions in and we'll get to as many as possible. Michael and I have quite a few questions ourselves. So, but we'll always try to get as many of yours in as well. And as always, if you do have something really burning that you want to make sure that we cover with Roger tonight and he has a chance to address it on the screen, you can always send your Venmo super chat in and we'll make sure you go ahead of everyone else to the front of the line and we'll get that done. And you'll also help out the channel. So it's a win win. So feel free to do that should you choose to do so. All right, Michael. So without further ado, I think it's time, my friend, don't you think?
It is.
Let's do
Let's
it. Go ahead, my friend.
let's bring up Roger Christian, please.
Let's go. All right, here we go.
Hey,
There he
Roger.
is.
Hi,
Hey,
hello everyone.
hey, welcome to our channel. We appreciate you so much being here.
It's a pleasure, and be good to talk about all things Star Wars.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
I know for sure. Wow. So Michael, I think since you've already got to speak with Roger, I'm going to go first. I want to get my first question in.
Okay. Yep.
And then you can go next. So,
Okay.
all right, is that cool? All right.
Yeah.
So I have to ask you, and this is kind of what I always love to explore and understand, is kind of the origin point of all this, right? So, what and I guess I have a two part question. Number one, how did the how did the opportunity, maybe put it that way, come about to have this opportunity to work with George Lucas and on the original Star Wars Episode 4, New Hope? And then the second part to that is once it was all done and you got to watch the premiere, you got to see everything, did you have a gut feeling at all it would become the iconic standard for sci-fi that it still is today?
Well, I'll compress the times because in the book there's a lot of description of what I was doing. But
Okay.
I was with the designer John Barry in Mexico, Guaymas, a tiny fishing village, making a movie called Lucky Lady, and we were converting old Mexican buildings into running arenas and sets and things for this huge movie. 20th Century Fox didn't really want to do Star Wars. Alan Ladd Jr. said, we're going to do it. They analyzed how much Star Wars would make, which is what they did in those days. And they analyzed that it would make $12 million at the box office because no one was watching science fiction.
Wow.
And they then cut the budget by 3. And that's how much they offered the filmmaker. So he was offered $4 million if he could make the movie. They'd been scouring how to do it. Gary Kurtz had got an $8 million budget. UK was exactly half the price of America, and we had a lot of empty studios. So it was suggested by Gloria Willard Hike, who wrote Lucky Lady, who wrote American Graffiti, that because George was talking about a spaghetti western in space, he should fly down and meet John and I, which is how we met. He turned up. I was dressing an old salt factory. He came in, and I kind of fairly open with him because I said, when he told me what he's trying to do, and I said, I really haven't related to any science fiction movies, and I read a lot of science fiction. I personally liked a real world that was gritty and used, and I'd never seen it done before, and I described it like an old car dripping oil and being repaired by the owner. I only found out when I got to London. In fact, I'd given him an exact description of the Millennium Falcon that he'd written. So we all got on incredibly well together, and we were in sync. So John Barry was the first person hired. I was the third person hired. They hired the DP in between, who actually, in the end, couldn't do the movie. And that's how we were then ended up in London, where it was announced that we only had $4 million to do the entire movie, which meant the art department budget was insanely low.
Wow.
And John Barry, he designed Clockwork Orange. He was still young as a designer, so he wasn't old and jaded, might be the word, although all the other art directors would resent it. But the difference is that, and this is George's talent, he did it across the board on the first movie.
Mm-hmm.
He knew I'd worked on a lot of films as an art director, set decorator. I'd done TV series, Randall and Hopkirk, which became cult classics. And I knew enough to do the job, but I didn't know enough to say, well, the only way we can do it is this, because it works. And John Barry was the same. So we got there. There was no money. George paid us for 4 months, just John Barry, myself, and Les Dealey, the art director. We had a tiny little studio in London, and we set about, when I'd done my breakdown of 10 pages of what we needed, and I thought, well, I can't do this. I've got to think of a different way. So I actually didn't tell anyone. I thought, you know what, my big peeve was sci-fi guns. Let's start there. So I went to the gun hire. I got a Sterling submachine gun, which I loved, and to me was a sci-fi weapon. Stuck some T-strip round it, put a couple of sights I'd found in the old store that we used in Ireland on nights, firing, so they could see at night. And then I thought, well, he keeps saying Han Solo's a Western cowboy. So I found the Mauser, which was a German beautiful pistol with a wooden handle, stuck sights on the top of that, changed a few things, stuck an old flash repeller on the front. And I called John Barry and I said, you better get George over here, and either I'm on the right track or I'll just get fired. So I might as well get it over with. And then George George loved it. And he stayed, actually. We were using super glue. My fingers were just covered. And we made Princess Leia's gun together.
Wow. That's awesome.
Sticking bits on that. And at the same time in the studio, Les and I had to make an R2-D2 work because there's no CGI. There was hardly any robotics. And there was certainly any form of radio control was pretty primitive. So George had cast all the little people, they're allowed to be called now, in England. And Kenny Baker was the only one strong enough, and he had a comedy duo, so we knew he was funny. And we built, and there's literally no money for wood. The carpenter, Bill Harmon, and I hired Bill because he made all the props for Monty Python. And if you ever watch Monty Python, like the Holy Grail, they couldn't even afford horses, so they had coconut shells to bang together. So he had some wood in the garage at home, and he brought it in. We built the barrel for him and the legs. He said, I can't make a top rod. Sorry, it's too complicated. I haven't got any tools. I haven't got anything. And so I found a lamp top in an old light store that had been thrown out, which we bought for 10 shillings, which is probably 75 cents. And it fitted, and we adapted it, and we got Kenny in it, and he couldn't walk. We stapled his boots inside the legs so that he could wear those, and that didn't work. I bought bits and pieces. I bought some old aircraft nozzles lights, and I was sticking those in just to give it a bit of a feeling. They're still there to this day. Also, that knife and fork, the little hands on him, I carved those at home with a penknife.
Oh, my goodness.
Bill stuck them in. And I bought, for some reason, with some bits of army junk, a fighter pilot's harness. And Bill stapled it inside, and Kenny could wear R2-D2 like a rucksack, and he actually walked 3 steps with George watching and Gary. And it's probably the most auspicious moment on Star Wars, because we knew he could have a movie, because if he didn't have R2-D2, we didn't have one. We knew we could do C-3PO. There's the famous Maria from Metropolis, and we knew we could make that work way better now with the right actor. And so that was the route forwards, which led into the studios.
Wow.
And that's where the fun started. And I was telling Michael that I'd made by then Chewbacca's. I found that crossbow that I loved, the bowcaster, and I showed George, because Ralph McQuarrie had a gun in his hands. And I thought this would be perfect for Chewbacca. George loved it. And I'd made all these different guns and different elements, and they had them put on a table the first day in January in the studio. And I was telling Michael, they had the first ADs and everybody. They picked up my Sterling submachine gun, which I'd made as a blaster, and threw it at me and said, "This is absolute crap. And don't you realize we're doing a science fiction movie for an American director?" And they went off to get me fired. And that's
wow.
That little anecdote tells you about the entire making of Star Wars for George, me, John Barry, and Les Dilly, and that's how it was. And me being me, and I'm very stubborn, and I just said, you know what, George and I are friends. We're making a movie I've always wanted to make, and I'm just going to carry on. And we did.
Wow.
And in fact, it was interesting to what recently I saw an interview that George had done with Christopher Nolan. They're talking about movie making. And George actually said it there. He said, you know, Christopher, there were only 5 people actually stood by me making Star Wars, and that was the art department.
Wow.
So cutting it short, we did so much. I mean, the making of it, we'd be here all night. But there's other stories we can tell. But
sure.
By the end of it, I mean, George was in hospital, exhausted, as you know, the tension and everything, and getting this thing made. And when I saw the screening for the crew in the Odeon in Tottenham Court Road, the cinema, the atmosphere went electric when that ship went overhead to start with, and all these naysayers and people have been putting us down, all were smiling and like, oh, it was their movie, and now suddenly they were all on side. Oh yeah, look,
of course
what we
it
did.
was.
And I always see, I grew up after the end of World War II. It was a grey, miserable place. There was nobody spoke. I was very insular, and I found my way out through King Arthur and legend and science fiction and all sorts of stuff. So I knew that if this got out, because they were all saying it'll never see the light of day.
Wow.
I knew if it got out, the lightsaber would be the icon of Star Wars, just as when you think about King Arthur, you think about Excalibur. So, you know, and I wielded Excalibur loads of times as a kid. So yeah, I thought it would be a success because for the first time, the audience didn't have to question this fake science fiction landscapes and costumes and everything that was not real. They accepted it, and there it was, and they were in a real world. You know, John Barry's masterstroke of taking George to Tunisia, there was Tatooine. All I had to do was dress in bits of technology out of my junk airplane scrap that I bought mountains of.
Wow.
And we made it look like a Tatooine.
Wow.
So that's a potted version of that.
It's fascinating. Amazing. Absolutely incredible, man. I just, you know, hearing this is like just, it's so surreal because, you know, I grew up watching Star Wars and I still watch Star Wars. And it's like, it's so, it means so much to the culture of entertainment across the world.
Yeah.
You know, it's not even by country, it's the world. And, you know, to hear you relay these memories and these stories of these things that I've seen my whole life and how they came to be, it's a little surreal, man. So it's a real honor. It's a real honor. I want you to know that to have you here.
You know, I was telling Michael before that's why I had to write the book. I was forced by the head of literature at Lucasfilm, David West Reynolds, who said, because John Barry died very young while he was working on Empire Strikes Back, he had meningitis. I'm the only one who knows every story about how it was made. George didn't know. He was too busy struggling to get his movie made. And so I was almost forced to write the book and how to make this documentary, because it's more, for me, it's more of a mentorship for everybody, because, you know, what does my son know? He knows huge Hollywood blockbusters, which are Star Wars, but the humble beginnings of where this all came from. And the last line in the book, which you'll get to, says, "Don't let anyone tell you you can't, you can." And that's the film industry, basically.
Oh, you ruined it for me.
Oh, there you go.
No. But it's so
you haven't got there yet. You're only halfway through. So.
But I mean, it's case in point. I mean, you've proven it. Like, you lived it. You've lived that. And, you know, I mean, like, we were telling this story about the parts for R2-D2 and like just going to get, you know, wood out of his garage. I mean, and when you see this amazing production on screen, you just don't fathom like that is what happened. Like, you got that kind, you know, it looks so perfect on the screen.
Well, R2-D2, a few weeks before we went out, I was called by John Barry with Les Dilly into the office, and he said, "Listen, the special effects supervisor was very like, oh, it's going to work. It's going to be fantastic." We knew it. And John Barry said, "It's not going to work, especially out in the desert. So make a lightweight fiberglass one, painted exactly as R2-D2. You can pull it along in fishing wire." And the first thing we shot ever was Uncle Owen and Luke buying the robots.
Okay. And
the first thing was R2-D2, and he crashed over. They were hitting other robots. It was a nightmare. It didn't work. And Gary Kurtz yelled out to Les and I, "Go and get the monofilament," which was translated as fishing wire. And we went to the truck, pulled out our secret one, put it down, and we laid down flat boards, put a bit of sand on the edge, and pulled them along. And most of the three-wheeled versions were pulled by fishing wire in that movie. And George is a very, very, very crafted editor. He knew exactly where he could cut and where he couldn't. But I always said, when you watch that first scene of them buying the robots, it's actually all about R2-D2. He's the voice and the storytelling of Star Wars. He's hardly in it because he couldn't be, because he wasn't working.
I got you. But when he's in it, it's powerful and it's meaningful to the story. And the one character that we can't understand with his beeps and all this stuff, but it doesn't matter because like we get it, get it, and that's what's amazing in the execution of it. It's
Yeah.
incredible.
And C-3PO, the first time he ever put on that gold suit that Norman Reynolds came down, he'd really handled it. The first time he had the full suit on was when he walked on for the first shot.
Wow.
And the leg shattered and cut in his foot, and they had to quickly tape it up. And film doesn't show, but honestly, there was gold tape sticking him together on that first. So it was that's why it was sealing wax and string, and it was made of just determination to get it done somehow.
That is determination. I mean, that is like, that is straight up, we're going to do this and we're not going to let anything stop us. And I'm telling you, when I watch the movie, even now hearing it, it's so surreal because it's like, I'm shocked because it looks so perfect. It's like, and you know, the budget must have been, you know, 150 million. You know, it's like like all this stuff, and it's incredible to know the manual work, the taping it up and just doing it, but it doesn't look that way, Roger. It looks beautiful.
Well, all credit to George, 100%. You know, he pulled it through. He knew what he could get away with, and he made it work.
Wow.
Mr. Christian, I was going to ask on R2D2, what percentage of the time was Kenny Baker actually in R2D2? Because I was reading that, you know, when they had the remote control, it was so much stuff in there he couldn't fit in there. So do you know how much of the time he was on screen he was actually in R2D2?
In the first one, he was in it when it not in three-legged mode because he couldn't get in then, but otherwise he was in it all the time.
Oh wow!
When I took on directing the second unit on the Phantom Menace, and George said to me, "Listen, handle R2D2 and the robots," because he said, "I don't have patience for him." So I went down to the workshops and I looked at this beautiful radio-controlled R2D2s that would work and everything. Now everything had changed so much, but I said, "Oh, what about Kenny?" Because they booked him, and they said, "Yeah, he's going to come and work it." And I said, "Have you had him in this?" No, it'll be fine. And I said, "No, it won't be fine." And I went and got a call to Kenny and got him down there, and he wouldn't fit. There was so much radio control. And in fact, on the Phantom Menace, we were in Tunisia. He spent the entire time by the pool in a thong, getting brown as a berry.
When he first came up to Elstree Studios, I read a little snippet of it, and what he drove up in what kind of car?
He'd made so much money, not from Star Wars, but from doing conventions and expos, that he bought himself a Rolls Royce. And it was a beautiful Corniche, and he'd had it adapted so that, you know, the pedals and everything, he could work it. That was the first thing he did. I didn't even get him in the studio. He said, come with me. And he took me around Leavesden, which is the old aerodrome, in this Rolls Royce. He was so proud of himself.
Seems like he was a really nice guy.
Yeah, he was. And I said, you see all that struggle, and he quit once, and then we had to get him back and everything. And I said, you see, it was worth it now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. And I just got to ask you, like, when's the last time that you actually watched Star Wars: A New Hope? Do you recall? Like, has it been recent, or has it been a while?
No, it's recent. No. And when I was writing the book, I had to watch it all again. You know, I'm doing my own research, and I'm looking at all the scenes and everything, because I have a very good memory, thank goodness. But I had to watch it, and I showed my son it. So pretty recently, and doing the documentary, I had to go through it again.
Yes. Well, I asked that to you, Mr. Christian, because I just wonder, you know, all this time that's passed, how did you feel, or how do you feel when you sit back and watch it now? Do you still, obviously you remember everything, but what do you feel inside? If you could just let us get a glimpse into the emotional side, what do you feel when you watch it now?
Well, for me, and I've written this book. I've done a new one now called We Can All Be Heroes, and it's based on the Luke Skywalker spiritual journey and mine, and Joseph Campbell. And Star Wars is the perfect myth. Because of Joseph Campbell's mentoring, George had the knowledge to construct a perfect myth for the cinema age. No one's ever done that before because they didn't have what George had. So I watch it with knowing that this movie is, I think, arguably the favorite. I know a lot of fans like Empire, which is George's least favorite movie.
Is it really?
Yeah, because it's an adult movie. George made his movies for 9 years old. That's the target audience, and it's brilliant, Empire Strikes Back. But George, if you look at Return of the Jedi, which came next, it's got Ewoks. It's much more kind of kids fun, which adults like as well. So I look at this first Star Wars, and I'm really proud to have kind of just fought against everything to get this made and buy airplane scrap and find junk pieces to make things out of, and to have achieved the result that is actually connected to the world like no other movie ever has, and I don't think ever will. That's because it gets to the subconscious correctly, which is what myths are intended to do and help us grow as individuals. So that all comes into it for me. It's a lot. I think it's just a perfect movie for the age.
Well, and I'm going to just add on to that and say, you can have a brilliant story, but if it is not executed brilliantly as well, it's not going to have the impact that you want. And I want to say the work that you have done, or you did on this, and your team and others that you worked with, let me tell you, that is just as brilliantly executed as the writing, because it had to be that way, or it would not have had the impact. It would have been a movie that we would have talked about, like, oh, the potential of Star Wars, but just didn't hit it. No, it's not the conversation, right? It hit it on all marks.
Yeah, it's true. And it's like when, you do a period film, there's books, there's paintings, you know what to do. When you're presented with a science fiction movie, there is nothing to reference. All I had was World War II bombers. I went on a submarine and had a look inside an old submarine inside it. And those kind of things that are engineered and are real. And was in my mind every minute of making the Millennium Falcon work, that no one should question this wasn't a ship we'd gone out and found and hired and rented that had been pretty knocked about and used a lot.
Wow.
So I have a quick question. Scott has a quick question for you. He asked you some questions last time. He said, what was your biggest yay, it worked moment on Star Wars, or any movie that you worked on?
There was almost every day with everything that worked. But I certainly that wooden dowel idea that I had on the lightsaber, because no one had ever done it, and the only way to put anything like that into a movie was to animate it with rotoscoping, hand by hand each frame. And I had this idea, which the DP said, "No, that'll never work, just throw it out." And George overrode him and said, "No, try it." And I painted the rod with front projection paint, and it picked up light. It kind of gave a glow on set that they could animate into. And I was inside going, when I was watching the DP, who was such a grump, thinking, yeah, that worked.
You stuck it to him, huh?
There were two things, actually. And the other one is, because no one really knows this, we had a tradition, because we were working, it was 7 days a week and all hours of the day and night. I never had a day off ever. We would meet the art department in my office, where I had tea bags and a kettle, and we'd have a cup of tea at 7 a.m. And I said to them, when they were talking about C-3PO and how to do the eyes, and they always either did it covered over, you couldn't see, or you could sometimes see the actor inside it. And I said, look, I've got an idea. I was watching something last night on TV, and they had the witnesses where they go and look at the suspects through a one-way mirror. And I said, why don't we get it? And they said, oh, that's a good idea. Roger, you handle that. I had to do the Millennium Falcon, every weapon, the robots, the land speeder. I mean, I thought, oh, why did I open my
Trash
mouth?
compactor, right?
Yeah. So I then, the genius idea of Ralph McQuarrie was these eyes lit up. And I got a little company to one-way mirror me plexiglass, and I got a company to brass the flutes, and I got it all done. I thought, how am I going to illuminate these? And we tried like Christmas tree bulbs and everything. They got hot. I couldn't do that. And by weird chance, I saw a documentary, and it was on the first camera they'd ever put down inside a human being. And I called my buyer in and said, listen, these can't get hot. You've got to find them. And he searched hospitals. He found them. And I put 3 of them in the lights, and we got a battery. Somehow we hid inside him. I don't know how we did it, but we got a battery pack inside C-3PO, and they lit up. And they're still there now to this day. That's how we did it.
Huh.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. Amazing. And you mentioned the land speeder. I just have to ask you about that real quick. What was the inspiration for the land speeder? I got to hear how that came about, and how did you get that from concept to Luke jumping inside and sitting down?
It's all the genius of Ralph McQuarrie. There were 6 paintings of Ralph that George brought to London. In there is everything on Star Wars you needed to see. And the first one, John Barry had read the script, and we thought, you know, this is going to hover. How are we going to do this? So that was the second thing we did before the movie started. And Bill Harmon, the carpenter, had some wheelbarrow wheels, so he brought those in that we could stand it on. And we found polystyrene, and he used to go around the studio and scrounging bits of polystyrene and stuff. So we made this big one that was a 4-seater, because in the script it has Obi-Wan Kenobi, it has R2-D2, C-3PO, Luke. And then George came down and said, oh, no, it's way too big. Luke would have a little sports car, and it's all beaten up. So we made 3. There's a picture in the book of it. And we made 3 of them. They got smaller and smaller until we got the size right. And then they tried hovercrafts, and it's just so unstable. It wouldn't stay still.
Okay.
And again, I saw there were tiny cars in Britain called Ogle, which are beautiful little sports cars. They were tiny on the road, and that company was actually not far from the studio. So they contacted them, and they agreed to build it in time, because we only had 2.5 months before shooting. We had no time. We had to farm everything out.
Goodness.
Yeah, a movie like this should have a year.
Yeah.
And they took the Reliant Robin, which is famous in Dr. Bean, in Mr. Bean, which is a 3-wheeler, and cut it off the top and built it. And in fact, if you look inside the Reliant Robin, the dashboard, everything is the land speeder. It's the same. We didn't change it.
Interesting. Okay.
And that worked. They got it, and it would work, because then you couldn't really see the front wheel. In the desert, I came up with another. I kept coming up with these things, and I said, you know what? The desert, when you watch, there are always a mirage. They're all over the place. And I said, why don't we hang a mirror at 45 degrees? It'll hide the wheels, and it'll reflect the desert. And then I said, let's pick some dust. So I got an old broom, and we tied it on the front, and it worked. This thing was driving through the desert. And then George rotoscoped some of them afterwards, because the thing, you know, it was done like that. And then they built a huge arm that would swing round when he landed or took off, and that kind of bounced for him to jump off it. That's how we did it.
Okay.
So you doing that made it look like it was floating, or had they planned on making it floating the whole time?
No, it couldn't float. There was no way to do it. It had to be on a huge pivot rig that could be kept out of the camera. It worked.
That's awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Little ingenuity there. A
Yeah.
lot of
A
ingenuity.
lot of ingenuity on everything. My goodness.
Britain is kind of has a history of crazy inventors. So when you go back, Brunel, I mean, all sorts of people doing crazy things. So I think we have a tradition of doing it.
That's awesome.
It is.
I have
Go
a
ahead,
quick
Mike.
question.
Go ahead.
So I was reading and it said that during like George came up and gave you the whole script of Star Wars, and it was called Journal of the Wills,
Yeah.
and everybody else would only get like sheets. But since you were the set decorator, you had to
Yeah.
have the whole thing from front to end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you keep the original script?
I had one, and I think some point we were clearing out everything, and I think I sadly sold it.
Oh, okay.
And somebody just contacted me who's got it because he wanted to know what the notes were inside it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That is
Wow.
That's crazy.
So-
Okay. And like a second part of that is, did you keep any of the drawings? I know you talk a lot about how they were doing rough sketches and drawings on the back of papers and stuff.
No,
for
the
like
only one I did, I made everything in my office with super glue and pieces of junk that I would collect. I got so much I had to move to another office and clear it up again. The only thing I drew out was the Luke's binobins, the binoculars. And that I drew versions of them because I was trying to figure out how I would do it. But in the end, I ended up getting 3 junk camera pieces from movie cameras and still cameras and stuck them all together with super glue and stuck some lenses on the front and made it work out of junk because I knew there was no way or money that I could do the usual, design it, they draw it up, it would go to a workshop and get made. We didn't have that capability.
Okay.
Wow.
Interesting.
There's something that I love about, I still do, I've always loved in the X-Wing fighters, the helmet that like Luke wears, and just the design and the look of those helmets are so tight. They're really sharp. And I don't know, I just think they look really cool. And I'm just curious, like, the insight, maybe some of the thinking behind the design of the helmet that they wore inside the X-Wings.
They were again from Ralph McQuarrie, but of course that was the costume designer who did.
Oh, that's true. That'd be a little different. That's true.
Yeah.
You're right.
He was all the time in my office getting bits and pieces to stick onto his costumes and sets and everything, and he was always the time. And John Barry was drawing up for him because it was the first film he'd ever actually designed. He was a costume in charge of huge movies like Gandhi, and he could do all of that and weapons. Wow. But it was the first one, and he had no idea what science fiction was. So he was always in our office. We worked as a team with him.
That's awesome. Can I ask you one more Star Wars question? We spent this whole thing on Star Wars, but you know what? This has just been amazing. What would you say is, and like, if you could just, I don't know, I guess I'm trying to say is like, what are you most, I'm not going to say the word proud of, because you should be proud of all of it. But like, is there one in particular that you made, and I'm wondering I think I may have an idea, that you created, that you had your hands in, that you look back of most fondly, let's say, I'll say most proud of, most fondly from Star Wars, that like when you watch the movie and you see it on screen, you're like, yep, that's the one. That's the one I really.
Yeah, it's the lightsaber handle.
I figured that was it.
Yeah. I loved it. And it's the symbol of the Jedis. It's a mystical object, and finding this Graflex handle that I could have used it as it was. It's such a beautifully designed for a purpose object, but I like everything, I changed it to give it my own kind of look that was a Star Wars look, and stuck the T-strip that I had left over from the blasters that I made, the first thing we ever made, and stuck those for a handle, and a bit of a bubble strip from an old Texas Instrument calculator, stuck that in the grip, and we stuck it wasn't used, by Luke in Tunisia. So George just needed it hanging on his belt, so we put an D ring on the end of it, and that was it really. And it's kind of they tell me now it's the most iconic prop in the history of cinema.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Plus-
I can't think of anything else you can compare it to that.
No. And
No.
I made it for about $15. I think that's all we paid for the Graflex handles. We paid £800. We had 33 of them.
And now they go
Wow.
for $200, $300, $400 now.
No, thousands.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah,
You can't get
thousands.
one now. The same one.
Oh my
They're
gosh.
thousands.
Yes.
Steve, ask Mr. Christian what Obi-Wan's lightsaber was made of.
There was
Oh.
part of a Rolls-Royce engine. I think it's the Merlin engine.
That's so
And there was
awesome.
a grenade
What?
handle.
Oh my gosh.
And bits like that of junk that we found that just looked right, and it
That's so
made it work,
cool,
because that was the first one used actually practically on Star Wars, because in the
Wow.
cantina he
Mhm.
brought it out and did it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Wow. It's phenomenal, man. Just phenomenal. I don't know, Michael. I'll let you ask some other questions, because I
Okay.
think I'm going to continue on Star Wars. I know there's so much other stuff we can
All
talk
right.
about.
This is, if I was reading correctly in your book, this, I just want confirmation. Tatooine wasn't a made-up name. It was actually the name of an ancient village in Tunisia.
Yeah, that was that's actually, we used that village. That was one that John Barry showed George, which are these grains which we couldn't use, but George used it in Phantom Menace. That's where Anakin was brought up, and the scenes of his mother when she has to let him go.
Oh, okay.
That's Tatooine. And George loved the name, so he changed it. And I forget which name was in the script, but it was different. And he changed it to Tatooine. He liked it.
I always thought it was a made-up name by George Lucas.
No, it's and I've got the picture of it in the documentary of the
That's
actual
fantastic.
sign where we were.
Okay.
Hey, now, I just remember real quick the documentary. Do you have a release date yet? On
No.
when do you think it'll be ready at all? Is it next year, you think?
No,
or-
I got it made the same way we made Star Wars. There was the editor and I in the middle of COVID, landlocked. I couldn't go and interview anybody, and I made it in virtual studios. I wouldn't give up, and we were able to film actors.
Great.
Film David West Reynolds. He was in America. I had Bill Harmon in London. I had the David French, where I found the lightsaber, the manager. He was telling the whole stories about me finding it and everything.
Nice.
So we did a kind of special that had a few people that were able to buy, but it's now broken into 6 parts.
Okay.
Which was the intention, because the Blu-ray special, if we can ever get it out that way again, it's 2 hours 20 minutes.
Wow.
So it's 6 like half-hour episodes now. So
Okay.
they're now trying to place it. That's the thing. So
Yep.
whenever it gets to somebody can sell it,
Wow.
then we'll. And there's a big demand for it, but they've got to get out there and get it into a streamer somehow.
Yes, definitely.
I know.
That would go viral. That would blow up if
I
that
know.
was available. Oh my gosh.
Of course it will. Yeah. So
Be
anyway,
incredible.
it's a bit like this. It's this whole same story of Star Wars. Got to get someone to believe that it's actually going to work.
You could sell it from your, you could sell it from a website or something.
Yeah, I know. Well, we started that, but they had to stop that because now they want to try to get it to a streamer to get it out more. So, but in the end, it'll go back to being sold.
I'm shocked Amazon or Netflix hasn't snatched it up.
Yeah.
Well, you got Hulu and so many of these
Disney
streaming.
Plus too.
Disney Plus,
for goodness sake.
Oh my gosh.
Nothing of this, the history of how it was all made is on there.
Yeah.
So
maybe because Kathleen Kennedy didn't have a hand in it.
Oh goodness.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't want to say a word.
Let's don't go down that road. Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, the day that does get worked out, because I believe it will.
Yeah.
It's going to be amazing. It's going to be
Well, it's a
incredible
legacy for everyone who
sure.
wants to study it and go back and see and where this whole thing originated, because it's growing. It's not getting smaller, Star Wars. It's every
No.
generation.
Mhm.
It's expanding. So it had to be done.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is my last Star Wars question,
Okay.
and I'll go on to some other stuff that you've done. If you were given the opportunity to direct a Star Wars movie, my personal preference would be that they do a Star Wars movie that went way in the past, like the Old Republic or way in past. What if you're given the free reign to do any kind of Star Wars movie you wanted to as a director? What would you do it, and what would you do?
Yeah, I mean, in a heartbeat, it would be like the be finding the Holy Grail for real. Yeah, no, of course I would love to. And having directed second unit, both Return of the Jedi and being trusted by George to film a lot of his movie for him and the Phantom Menace, I would go way into the past. I would use like the samurai influence, which is what was the first influence to George, and spaghetti westerns are just new interpretations of the samurai movies, and I would go back to that, way into the past, of where the real origins of this came from and the idea of the Jedis. I think would be really interesting for people, and it would have those echoes, of Lord of the Rings and
Yes,
this kind of feel to it. So yeah, that's what I would do.
that would be so fantastic. I'd be number one in line,
Yeah, me
ready
too.
for it. Okay, I promised I wouldn't talk about Star Wars anymore. So, um, so 1979, after Star Wars is done, you worked on The Life of Brian and also Alien at the same time. That must have been a very busy year for you.
Yeah, I didn't have any time off, and Alien came up. The Life of Brian, actually, we were 2 weeks ready to go down to Tunisia, and it got cancelled. And Ridley had already started Alien. He'd hired Michael Seymour to design it, and a set decorator who was a dear friend of mine who was really more into period films and stuff. And so I got a call the day that it went down. I was in the office of Life of Brian, and Ridley called me and said, "Get your backside down here to Shepperton now. I need you." So I went, read the script, and I knew Ridley. I'd art directed commercials for him. So and I thought, wow, this is going to be amazing. So I got hired on the spot and just got stuck in. And another one, it was under budgeted. There was no time. They cut $600,000 out of the budget about 6 weeks before, just when I was starting.
Oh
And
man.
we had to make it work again. So they asked me, Ridley said he wanted a space truck, like an army truck in space that was very used. So I got my 3 prop guys. I trained how to do the Millennium Falcon. They all hired them immediately, and we just got stuck in to make this kind of army truck in space.
Wow.
The Nostromo, right?
Yeah, we got it right. I think that one, the whole ship.
Oh my
I just
gosh.
loved it, and it was Ridley wanted those shots at the beginning, handheld, going all around the ship. So it was built on 2 stages, and you went in one small gap, and that was it. You had to go around the whole ship. It wasn't like sets you normally see that were open. This was lit internally, everything. It was just amazing. It was really like being on board. And I inherited the bridge, which was an absolute nightmare of coordination between effects and design and the art department and costumes, everything. It was a mammoth undertaking that I didn't think would ever end, but we got it done.
So
I loved that set.
They cut 600,000 off of the art
Yeah.
direction.
Well, yeah, because on a movie like that, there aren't any stars in it. The money is all on the art department. That's where they cut most of it from.
That's a
So
shame.
we just had to. Well, in fact, the when they wake up and the flower pods open, that set went out. That wasn't able to be done. We had a Spanish art director, and Ridley and I and we talked about it, and the effects boys had those canopies and they had some pistons, and we secretly built it without 20th Century Fox knowing, so that Ridley could have it and film it. And,
Wow.
and the space jockey set, that was out. They said, you can't do it, you can't afford it. And Ridley stuck to his guns. Absolute credibility to him. And they figured out a way to build half of it on a turntable so that it could turn, and you do the reverses against the same background because you wouldn't know. Stuff like that was going on. It wasn't any more easy.
Goodness. Okay. Good thing they had you there, because man, after Star Wars, you could do anything at that point.
I guess so. Yeah.
I think, yeah. We got a question from Scott again, and he would like to know, did the actors actually eat the space food in the cafe before the alien busted out?
Yes.
No spoilers. Yes.
Yeah. I got all cereals. I got different ones that things look cool and different, and I filled up everything in there. And yeah, they were eating it.
Oh man. Okay.
Listen, actors are always hungry. If you put a food out, they will eat it. Believe me. They don't need any encouraging. They're not going to say, "No, I'm not eating. That's on the set." No, they got struck. They get stuck straight in.
Oh man. Oh my gosh. And that was so. Looking back at, I'm gonna ask you kind of the same question I did for Star Wars. I just love to get your insight for Alien as well. When you look at Alien, is there what are you most proud? I keep saying proud of
the bridge,
but yeah,
the
bridge. Yeah,
that set is incredible. And when they crash, we got everything working. That it was all practical. There's no CGI. There's no additions to that. The opening shot, and again, this tells you how these things were done, is the graphics from the computers are reflected in the visor of the helmet. Mm-hmm. And those helmets, we adapted motorbike helmets. And there was no way to do it. And I said, Ridley, we were doing, and Derek Jarman is a famous painter in Britain who designed actually a huge film for Ken Russell, who I knew. And we were doing stuff with 8mm projectors onto walls and stuff. And I said, I think if we project it for real on it. So again, Ridley just said, do it. Nobody said, oh, don't be stupid. And they got me some computer, which were just about invented then when Alien was being done. They got me some readouts, and we put it onto a 16mm projector. And I was holding it on a camera stand and changing the focus and changing the depth, and got it reading, and Ridley filmed it. That's what went into the movie as a test before we started shooting. So stuff like that was going on. There's so many stories. I don't have time now because I'm going to get my son on my back in a minute.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah, we are definitely winding down, folks, with Mr. Christian tonight. It's been so kind of you to spend this time with us tonight. And I only have really one more question for me tonight, and then we'll go ahead and start wrapping things up. And it's regarding this wicked little movie called The Cinder. And, I'll tell you something. I like the casting. Casting was great. And these nightmare sequences, man, I'm telling you, it's just a trippy movie. And I would just love to hear your thoughts on your experience directing that, because Roger directed that film, guys.
It was another, I don't know why, it was so difficult. I had a producer who was a monster, and I was trying to keep all the tension away from the actors and everything, and trying to get it made. And he wanted it more like a blood splattery movie, got screaming at me, more blood. And I'm going, no, it's psychological horror. And we were making up the nightmares, like the rats coming out of the mouth.
Yes.
That wasn't in the script. We made that up, and then other stuff was, and it was a great script. And I love psychological horror.
Yep.
It wasn't. It was absolutely probably the most difficult thing I've ever done to direct it and hold it together. But I got it made. And then Paramount dumped it, and it hardly got out, despite the fact that the LA Times said this is going to do the same as Omen business. It opened in Toronto, and the main Globe and Mail, which is the main paper in Toronto, said, when a film arrives in this city without the courtesy of a press screening, this time you're wrong, Paramount. And they said I was a return of Hitchcock.
Wow.
And then, if you may know, but Quentin Tarantino just took it up. It's his favorite movie of the year it released.
Wow.
I met Guillermo del Toro through it. It's one of his favorite movies, and it's become a cult classic. I wish it had gone and done the box office that we thought it would have done, because I could have then gone on in that genre, which I love.
Yes.
I watch with audiences and getting people really scared.
Yes.
Without acres of blood and without all this stuff, but with a story. And it's a very interesting story. The writer was very interesting. It kind of was about his childhood. I met Alan Pakula. It opened the Avoriaz Festival of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Animation, which was the biggest science fiction festival in the world. It was in Avoriaz in France, and it was chosen to be shown by Jacques Chabrol, who was one of the great French filmmakers. And I only found out when I was in the coach going up, it was actually chosen to be the opening film. And I met George Miller, the Mad Max director, who's a huge fan of it, through it. And I kind of got redeemed. I thought, wow, I haven't done wrong. People are really appreciating this movie. And it became a kind of cult classic because of that. But Alan Pakula came to the table. I was downstairs. I was even put in a bad hotel. I wasn't even included where all the other filmmakers were. And then when they saw the reaction, I was invited to dinner. This was a big thing. And so blow me, I'm at dinner, and then this word goes out, Jim Henson and Gary Kurtz want to see you, because their film that they made closed the festival. You'll know what it is, the beautiful science fiction film. So they came down and were hugging me and congratulating me, and I could see the Paramount execs looking like this. Then George Miller, and then Alan Pakula. They said, Alan Pakula, now I was being fed really good food. Alan Pakula wants to speak to you. Now, Alan Pakula directed What All the President's Men. I mean, legendary director. I was in awe of him. I went up the top and he looked at me and he said, was this film hard to make? And I said, does it show? He took me to lunch and he helped me so much.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's awesome.
And he said, it's, it doesn't change, Roger. It's the same. So you just get used to it. But I'm very proud of that movie. People kept saying we should remake it, and then you think, why remake something? But
I know
it's and I still would have liked to have kind of done some more in that genre. Actually,
that would have been amazing. Yes. Well, just so you know, in case you haven't looked lately, it's currently at 80% on Rotten Tomatoes. That's how high it is.
It is.
That's really high on Rotten Tomatoes. That's awesome. So I'm telling you guys, everyone listening and watching the replay, go check this out. It's called Descender from 1982, directed by our guest Roger Christian, and it is a wild ride, and I highly recommend checking it out for sure. And I just got to say one thing, Roger. I don't know how you did the bathroom scene with the bleeding mirrors, but
For real.
it was brilliant. Yeah, look, you had to,
I
right?
did. I said if you make the glass, and they make glass that could crack, and they put a plunger that they could hit the grips behind, and we
Okay,
put blood sacks behind it, and it
gotcha.
worked.
Yeah,
Yeah,
worked great. It's
Wow.
awesome. I'm like, oh wow, this is amazing.
I love that.
Really
scene.
good looking
Yeah.
visual. It's like fantastic. So well done. So well
And
done.
the actor that had such wonderful actors. I mean, Shirley Knight.
Sure.
She got an Oscar for the Rain People, that Coppola's film. And she got, I don't know, 3 or 4 Tony Awards on Broadway. She was unused.
Wow.
Alan gave me a hug at the top of the stairs when I met him, and he said, "That's for Shirley Knight. She's one of our finest actresses. No one was hiring her, and thank you for giving her such an interesting role."
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
fantastic, man.
Yeah.
Well, Roger, it's never too late to do another one. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I know that. I know
Never too
that.
late.
I'm still, yeah, no, I know.
Hey, Mr. Christian,
right.
I had a quick question. I know it's getting tight, but my question is really quick. In the life of Brian, how much blowback from the religious people in England was there due to the style of
huge.
movie?
It was banned.
Oh, it was banned? I didn't realize it was banned.
Oh, it was banned in loads of cities when it opened. It became, I think that helped it to be such a success. But no, it was banned. They were saying, you can't do this. When that's how it collapsed. And I'm grateful because I got onto Alien. But that was because Lord Delfont, who was financing it, read the script only a few weeks before we were to leave to shoot. And he cancelled it on the spot. It was that George Harrison funded it.
Oh, I saw that. I saw George Harrison.
He mortgaged his house and used money that had to go to the tax people as a tax write-off, and he funded the full movie.
Wow.
Yeah. So it has a lot of history, that one.
Yes.
Wow. And
we can do part 2 if you want, then, because I ought to get back to get him to bed. Otherwise, he's going to be.
Yes, definitely.
I'll be punished in the morning because he'll be grumpy.
Well, everyone in the chat, I'll just kind of all saying thank you so much as well. They're really enjoying it, and that's a true honor to see a legend like yourself. And everyone is saying the same thing. So we do too, Mr. Christian. It's been an honor, and really appreciate you making this time to spend an hour with us tonight. It's really made our week, made our night.
Very good. Well, we can do one on the sender and other things. So you can do a part 2.
Do a live watch or another interview, we'd love to have you.
You can do a director's cut.
There we go. That's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Mr. Christian. Michael, you
good
just take care, and good to meet you too. And we'll see you soon. Thanks again.
Yeah.
Good night,
everybody. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right. That was awesome. Guys, how about that? Isn't that great, Mike? What a great time.
Yes.
What an amazing guy. Such a sweet man. What a great, you can just tell he's got a great spirit about him. And man, what's
very
awesome
giving.
is, a very giving and down to earth, humble. And, it's like, as we, get to meet people like this, and the folks I've met so far on my Craven channel, and you see these folks that have done so many things, and they're still humble, they're still down to earth about it, and you just adds another level of respect for all these folks, man. And that's an Academy Award winning legend. That's someone like literally created everything, the lightsaber. I mean, you heard the stories, and if any of you came late, you've got to go back and watch the replay.
Yes,
because
he's
whoa.
What's that? He's lived it.
Yeah, he lived it. He did it. And the stuff you see on Star Wars, you're gonna want to know this information because it's gonna change everything.
Yes,
everything. Thank you, Heavy Metal Beer Club. Great to see you, man. Good to see you both, if you're both here. And Denisha as well. And Scott, of course, great seeing you too, Scott. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for asking questions.
Yes, and John. Thank you, John Best, as well. All right, and we had of course, Val is here, and Michael visited us for a little while from Movies and Beyond. Awesome. Hope you enjoyed it, Michael. That was awesome, man. That was a really great time.
Yeah, it was fun.
Great time.